Hello, this is RV Vagabond Jerry, and now that my summer Canadian adventure is over, I wanted to do a summary video to let you know how it went and some more details. And the main purpose of doing this trip was to travel with my motorhome through Labrador and Newfoundland. I also went through all of the other northeastern Canadian provinces. So I'm going to tell you about those. And I started out in Windsor, Ontario, which is right across the river from Detroit. And that was in the last few days of May that I started this trip. So after Windsor, I went through London, Ottawa, Montreal, and Quebec City. And during this whole time, it was pretty warm during the day, each day. But fortunately, it cooled off enough at night that I could sleep just by boondocking in a parking lot somewhere. And some of the days did get pretty hot. So I spent 5 days in Ontario, and then I went up to Quebec, in Quebec City, and above that in a town called Baie-Comeau. And there it turned really cold. It was just like it was winter again. Baie-Comeau is a small town. I did a video there, but I stayed there 6 days because my motorhome's inverter went out. It would just turn itself off. And after going to a few places trying to find someone to fix it, I finally found a man who knew how to fix it, but I had to buy a new inverter, and I had to order that out of Oregon to ship it all the way from Oregon to Baie-Comeau, Quebec. And the man who fixed it, he had some other kind of business, but he just happened to know how to fix inverters. So I waited at his place there till it came in, which was 5 days. And really nice man. He let me plug into an electric outlet on the outside of his building. He even let me use his truck to drive around to go to restaurants and shopping. So he installed my new inverter. Works fine. So I spent 14 days in Quebec. Then I went up to Labrador City, and there it was still very cold. And the trip up there was mostly, well, I think about half on gravel roads, which I was not aware of. The road going from Baie-Comeau to Labrador City, it's paved in some places, some not, but I wouldn't recommend anybody go there. That is a lot of gravel road traveling. And when I was there, I stayed at a Walmart that was in a shopping center. And while I was there, my brakes went out. I have air brakes on my motorhome, and the air brakes sprung a leak. And when that happens, it will not release the brakes. So I had to find somebody who had a mobile RV repair service who came out and fixed my air brake leaks. So after Labrador City, I drove eastward all the way across Labrador to the next largest town, which is Goose Bay. I made a video there, and then I drove further southeast to the ferry that ferries you over to Newfoundland. So I spent 4 nights in Labrador. Then in Newfoundland, there is a large national park on the west coast of Newfoundland. So I spent several days there, got some good videos, and then I continued driving eastward to Deer Lake. And when I was at a provincial park there, my air brakes went out again. The guy who fixed them, I guess, didn't do a very good job. So I had to call someone else. Now this time I wasn't in town. I was about 40 miles or so outside of town at a campground. So I had to make a lot of phone calls. I finally found someone to come out and fix those air brakes again, and he did a good job. It's been a long time now, and I have no more trouble with my air brakes. Then I went to the town of Grand Falls, where I stayed in an RV park, and that was my first RV park in Canada. So by then, I had spent 35 days boondocking, or actually lot docking, in all of the places I had been in Canada so far, 35 days. And then I went to the town of Dildo, which you may have heard of. Nice little town. I spent 3 days there, and then went over to St. John's. I spent 4 nights at a Walmart in St. John's, did some videos there, and then I went down south of St. John's, and the days on Newfoundland were warm, not terribly hot. There were warm days, but the nights always cooled down very nicely. Now let me tell you about the ferries from Newfoundland to Nova Scotia. There's 2 of them. One is on the southwest side of the island, and one is on the southeast side of the island. The southwest side, it's a 7-hour ferry. The one from the southeast side of Newfoundland is a 16-hour ferry. And that 16-hour ferry leaves at 5:30 p.m. So it goes all night long. And they will not let you stay in your motorhome on the ferry. Whatever kind of vehicle you have, you lock it up. Well, you don't need to lock it up, but you go upstairs to the lounge. They will not allow you to stay in your vehicle while the ferry is at sea. And I think that's because if by chance the ferry was sinking, you might just sleep right through it. I can't imagine that happening. With their speakers, they have very loud sirens and such. I can't imagine that happening, but I'm pretty sure that's the reason. So, I would have to get a room to have a bed to sleep in that night. Well, I found out that there was room on the ferry for my motorhome, but all of the rooms, the sleeping rooms, were all booked up. So that was the factor that said, well, no, I'm not going to go through that. I'm going to have to go to the ferry on the southwest side because it leaves in the morning and it's just a daytime ferry. Now, the cost of the 2 ferries, all factors considered, is fairly close to each other. So the cost is not a factor in which one to choose. It's really if you can get a room on the long ferry. Short ferry, you certainly do not need a room. Now, one factor is to get to the southwest ferry, you have to drive all the way back across Newfoundland, and that is an all-day trip. So you have to have time for that. So that's what I did. I had one night in a campground with electric the night before going on to the ferry, which is really close to it. So I ferried down to Nova Scotia. And at that point, I had spent 19 days on Newfoundland. So in Nova Scotia, I went over to Sydney, which is the main city in Nova Scotia on the north side. I spent 3 nights in a Walmart there. Then I went down to the towns of Truro, Bridgewater, and Digby. Got some more good videos in the south side of Nova Scotia. Spent 7 days in Nova Scotia, and then I went up to Prince Edward Island. Drove around the island, spent 5 nights on Prince Edward Island. Then I went over to New Brunswick. Spent 5 nights in New Brunswick, going through Moncton, Grand Falls, Bathurst, and St. John. So all in all, I spent 60 days in Canada. And as usual, I count on my solar panels to keep my batteries charged, because I don't stay in RV parks with hookups very often. And I would say I had bad weather about half of the time in Canada. And bad weather being rain, total overcast, where I'm not getting much sun for my solar panels. So there were certainly a number of days when I had to run my generator for an hour or two to boost up my batteries. Now, one of my worries in going to such a faraway place for a trip, especially in another country like Canada, is if I have trouble with my RV, which I certainly did. And oh, by the way, one of the things I found is that the whole time I was in Quebec, everybody spoke French. And some places, the employees of stores and such spoke English, but some places they didn't, so I had to struggle with that as well. And finding someone to work on my motorhome who spoke English was a problem. So the things that went wrong with my motorhome, besides my inverter, was, number one, my bed broke. The bed frame just broke and caused my foot side of the bed to go down, and I still haven't gotten that fixed. I had the two problems with my air brakes. I had to air up my tires twice, and when I did that, when I took the tires off, or had a tire shop do that, I found that two of my tires have a place where the metal is showing through on my inside dual tires, and they're under warranty, so that's going to take a warranty claim, which I have not gotten to yet. What they did was they just didn't air up the tires all the way. They didn't want to put too much air pressure onto them with that metal showing, because it could cause a serious leak, but it's held up okay. I lost one of my hubcaps. I finally got that replaced. So the only real serious problem that went wrong with my motorhome was the inverter. That had to be replaced, and that cost a lot. To buy the new inverter, have it shipped from Oregon to Baie-Comeau, Quebec, and then pay someone to install it. But that's the only real serious thing that went wrong. Well, the air brake certainly was, but I found someone that fixed that fairly quickly. And that happened in Labrador and Newfoundland, where they speak English. This French thing is only in Quebec. And another thing I want to tell you is about the roads in Canada. They do not have any interstate quality roads outside the big cities like Toronto. So pretty much all the time I'm driving on roads that is one lane in each direction, and they are full of potholes. Canada is really bad about not filling their potholes. In fact, what they do, even in the cities, instead of filling up the pothole, they will put up a sign that says, "Warning, potholes." Instead of fixing the potholes, they put up a sign telling you they're there. Well, we know that. Here in America, we don't bother with signs. We fix them. So the roads in Canada are really bad compared to the States. So now that I'm out of Canada, I'm in Maine. Where do I go from here? I'm going to be following along the Atlantic coast from Maine, going down the coast to South Carolina. And that's going to be the end of my summer 2023 adventure. So I hope you have been watching my videos of this trip. And I'm not going to do a winter trip this year. I'm pretty much not going to do any more winter trips. I've been everywhere there is to go in the winter. There's no more videos to do. So next summer is going to be another exciting summer. And I've got 3 more summers that already I've got planned as to where I want to go. So to keep videos up during the winter, I'm going to kind of stretch out the videos. I've been putting up one every other day. I'm going to start relaxing that down to one every 3 or 4 days. So the rest of my videos from this trip, you'll be watching going into part of the winter. I'm just going to be hanging out in South Texas for this winter, and then next summer going up to the Four Corners states, New Mexico, Colorado, Utah, and Arizona. So stick with me through the winter, and going to be another exciting summer coming up. Good day, folks.